It was one of the most chaotic press conferences in recent memory. After firing GM Patrick Levine following a last-place 58-point season, Canucks president of hockey ops Jim Rutherford took the podium. He didn't just answer questions, he dropped bombshells, revealing a level of dysfunction no one could have imagined. This wasn't about one issue, it was about everything. Flawed strategies, a toxic culture, and the uncertain future of the front office. We're breaking down the 7 most shocking takeaways from this press conference and from the day that the Canucks finally told the brutal truth. Now, this first takeaway, I like to call a strategy that was built on fear. Now, let's start with the revelation that reframes the entire last year when the Canucks signed the likes of Brock Besser, Connor Garland, and Thatcher Demko to those big contracts. It was sold as solidifying the core. We now know that was a half-truth. The real reason? A high-stakes gamble to appease Quinn Hughes, a player the front office already knew was leaving, and Rutherford said so himself. Here's the jaw-dropping quote from Rutherford. I've known for some time that Quinn was not staying in Vancouver. It's one of the reasons we signed Besser, Garland, and Demko, hoping for a little bit of a chance right down to the end. So the president of hockey ops admitted he committed millions in long-term deals as a desperate ploy to convince a player he already knew was not resigning. This wasn't team building. It was a reactive move born from fear, a colossal failure of asset management. Instead of facing the reality of Hughes wanting out, they gambled the franchise's financial flexibility with these contracts. And what does this say to the likes of Besser and Demko? Your contracts were just bargaining chips in a game about another player. It reveals a management style based on crisis, not a confident long-term vision. My second takeaway from this has to do with the fallout. A persistently toxic locker room from the Vancouver Canucks. And Rutherford, of course, spoke about this. A front office operating with that level of desperation rarely creates a healthy environment. For years, whispers surrounded the Vancouver Canucks dressing room, especially the public friction between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson that led to Miller's trade. The hope was that once he was gone, the room could heal. Now, according to Rutherford, that wasn't the case at all. He stated plainly that things were really bad. Problems didn't just linger, they festered, and it wasn't until after the March 6th trade deadline that he saw a change. Here's the quote. Since the trade deadline, the chemistry and the culture over the past 5 weeks is the best it's been since I've been here. If that didn't get cleaned up, I can guarantee it wasn't going anywhere. The president of hockey ops is admitting that for most of his tenure, the team's culture was fundamentally broken. The toxicity ran deeper than just one player. A desperate front office and a toxic locker room aren't separate issues, they're intertwined, creating a vortex of dysfunction. Now let's take a look at the third takeaway. And that is the blame and the apology and the accountability to the fans, which Rutherford did in fact talk about and he did address. Now, after dropping these bombshells, of course, Rutherford had to face the people who endured it all, the fans. In a hockey mad city like Vancouver, finishing dead last, of course, is an insult unless you want to tank, but that is your chosen right. To his credit, Rutherford started with an apology, not excuses. He called the season really bad and frustrating, recognizing it was hard to watch for the fans. So he took accountability. Here's part of his opening statement. We just came to the end of a year that was really bad. Fans kept coming. They were loyal. We're acknowledging the obvious and saying thank you. Now, I have to admit, this part shouldn't necessarily come from just Rutherford. This should actually be coming from ownership. But who knows if we will actually even hear from ownership at this point. Now, on the surface, it's what you want to hear, right? By firing his handpicked GM, Patrick Levine, he showed some accountability. He did take all the blame for everything that happened this season. That is one thing he also said in his press conference as well. However, for many long-suffering fans, an apology might ring hollow. Thanking fans for loyalty after a 58-point season feels weak when the damage is done. The apology lands differently when you know the season was torpedoed by a flawed strategy and a toxic room that management let fester. It was a necessary first step, but its value will be measured in actions, not words. Let's take a look at the fourth takeaway, which is the architect's exit. Rutherford may not be here much longer, and he discussed this and talked about this at length in this press conference. Now, what Rutherford said, well, let's keep in mind, Jim Rutherford is 77 years old. He came to Vancouver for a 2-year commitment. That is something that he talked about. He only signed up for technically 2 years and is now in his 4th season. After presiding over the team's worst ever finish and firing his handpicked GM, the architect of this mess hinted he might not stick around for the rebuild. This was perhaps the most unsettling part for anyone hoping for stability. He said, I had a lot of thoughts about my future, but right now my focus is on getting a GM and getting through the draft. And when I do that, I will think a lot more seriously about what makes sense. Now, to me, that doesn't sound like a man digging in for a long fight. It sounds like a man eyeing the exit. Like he's eyeing the exit doors if you're on like a plane or whatnot. He's committing to immediate tasks, but everything after that is a giant question mark. This creates a massive leadership vacuum. What top tier GM candidate wants a job where their boss might walk away a few months later? Then again, could be groomed to eventually take over Rutherford's spot. It suggests his plan might be to set the table and then leave someone else to cook the meal. Now, looking at takeaway number 5, which is I call it the new blueprint, full autonomy for the next general manager. That is the 5th takeaway that I took from this press conference. Now, amid the wreckage, Rutherford made a vow that could fundamentally change how the Canucks operate. The next general manager will have complete autonomy over all hockey decisions. This is a huge shift for an organization long plagued by rumors of ownership meddling. He stated, I want the new GM to make all hockey decisions. As for hockey related with the players, he will make those decisions. So this power extends to the roster, contracts, and even the future of the head coach, Adam Foote. This is the carrot being dangled to every potential GM. You won't just be a manager, you'll be the architect. He also named Ryan Johnson, GM of the Abbotsford Canucks, as a strong internal candidate, but confirmed the search will be external as well. The promise of autonomy is the headline, a signal that Vancouver is serious about changing its reputation. Question is, will anyone actually believe him? Now that leads us to our 6th takeaway. And that's what I call the Watcher. If anyone's watched, Marvel and, like the Marvel series, you guys know who the Watcher is. So I call this the Watcher, ownership's role in the new hire. Now, just as Rutherford finished his press conference or his speech about an empowered GM, he added a detail that sent a shiver down the spine of Canucks fans. Definitely sent a shiver down my spine, that's for sure. A detail that contradicts his promise a little bit. While the new GM will have full control, owner Francesco Aquilini will be directly involved in picking that person. Rutherford explained his plan for the final interviews. Now, he said, I'm going to want ownership in the interviews once it gets narrowed down to a smaller group. It's important to have his input on it. He did mention that, for the initial interviews, Aquilini probably won't be involved, but he'll have him involved once they narrow it down to like a handful of, potentials. Now, an owner being involved in hiring a key executive isn't unusual, but this is Francesco Aquilini that we're talking about, an owner with a history of being hands-on and, getting involved. So while Rutherford promises full autonomy, he's also bringing the one person most associated with the lack of it into the final decision. How can a candidate believe they'll be independent when they need approval from an owner known for getting involved? It undermines the very promise that Rutherford is selling and reinforces the perception that in Vancouver, all roads lead back to the owner's office. Now, the seventh and final takeaway that I took from this press conference, I like to call the Glimmer of Hope, optimism for the future. So that is the seventh takeover, or takeaway, my apologies, that I got from this press conference. Now, after an hour of chaos, Rutherford tried to end on a hopeful note. He did crack a couple of jokes as well. He attempted to sell a vision built on a word this organization has avoided for a full decade, a full rebuild. Having finished last, the Canucks are positioned to truly start over. Here's his recipe for a turnaround, adding a couple of veteran players as mentors, blending them in with the youth, getting healthy, and getting Thatcher Demko back on track. Of course, we all know a lot of Canuck fans are not really sold on Demko getting back on track, but Demko did have a lot to say in his year-end interviews. We'll probably go over some of what some of the players said in other videos, but for this one, we're focusing on Jim Rutherford. Now, the plan is classic. An injection of youth with top prospects like Jonathan Lekkerimäki and Braden Coots, plus a home run draft pick, a return to health, especially a full season from Thatcher Demko, and the right kind of veterans to be mentors, a direct response to the toxic locker room. It's a multi-year process requiring patience, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like a singular vision, not a desperate attempt to just make the playoffs. And he didn't say that at all in this press conference whatsoever, which is very good to hear, for once. Now, that was one of the most unbelievable press conferences we've ever seen. I know Rutherford has his quotes. We all remember, of course, the whole, Quinn wants to play with his brother's press conference that we saw from like about a year ago. But the curtain was pulled back in this one, and the chaos was absolutely laid bare. But what do you think? What was the single most shocking revelation to you? The admission of a broken team culture, the flawed contract strategy, or Rutherford hinting he might be on his way out? Let me know your biggest takeaway in the comments section down below. So, on that note, where do the Canucks go from here? The path is somehow both clear and more uncertain. It's clear because the charade is over, the failed retool on the fly is dead, and the organization has finally admitted a full-scale rebuild is needed. Ownership is on board with it. The ugly truth is essentially out. But the future is deeply uncertain. Now, the man who laid out this plan, Jim Rutherford, might not see it through all the way. The promise of full autonomy for the next GM comes with the huge asterisk of an owner in the interview room. Friday's press conference was the end of an era defined by half measures. Rutherford, in one fury hour, burned it all absolutely to the ground. It was painful, but maybe it was necessary. This is what rock bottom looks like. The hope is that from these ashes, something real can finally begin to grow. Thanks for watching. On your way out, like the video and subscribe to The Line Change for more Canucks content as well as draft content, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.